Spoiler season may be coming to a close for Riftbound, but that means we can finally play the game. So this past weekend, a tournament did take place on Tabletop Simulator, which I'll dive into the results in this video. But a small caveat I want to add up front is that we are still technically in spoiler season, so we are likely missing a few key staples for some of the other legends of the set. However, I thought that these lists were complete enough, or at least something to get players started with, because many of us are proxying up and trying to play ourselves. So I figured, why not? I think it's a great initiative that Max is leading, and it gives at least people a starting point for some of their favorite legends to dive into. I've done a couple gameplay videos, but I realized I haven't done more of a deck list video myself. So hey, this will be the first one. I'll definitely be doing a lot more in the future. So with that out of the way, let's dive in. So yes, as I mentioned up front, we do have the top 8 as well as the full meta breakdown, which was 32 players. And I want to give a huge shout out to Max for putting this on. He's actually going to be doing this weekly from the sounds of it. So I'll make sure to have a link down below if you are interested in tabletop simulator style events. And then also I want to give a special shout out as well to Riftbound Decks, who was able to actually put these in a sort of ranking so that I could easily put together the video and make sure I had 1 through 8 correctly represented. So for those who maybe not seen our top placement coverage prior, I always like to just include one deck list of the top performing archetypes. So in this case, you know, your top performing Victor list, your top performing Ahri list, what have you, as we go through the course of the video. And as I mentioned up front, this is towards the end of spoiler season, so some things may change, but I still think these are some great lists to start with. Again, for the sake of many of us are just trying to proxy play and go to locals or even demo the game with our local friends, store employees, what have you. So definitely use these lists for that nature. But of course, I think the obvious part that we have to talk about is just the Victor domination. If you follow our other content, this is kind of a no-brainer, if only because it is the most complete deck that we have and the one people had the most time with testing so far. So I'm not all that surprised to see Victor here taking up a good chunk of the meta as well as the top 8 placements. The one thing I am surprised about, however, is Set being the second most played deck in the format and not making the top 8 cut at all. There's, I think, a lot of value in that deck, as well as the Master Yi deck is kind of the ones that I've been gravitating to personally. But I know that this is a first tournament experience. We're still missing some cards, and I really can't wait to see how this shapes up over the next few weeks. For me personally, that's the most exciting part of any new card game, is seeing how the meta evolves over time, especially as there could be a couple key bombs left in spoiler season. I think it's gonna be really great to see how this evolves over time. But without further ado, let's dive into these lists themselves. So up first, we gotta talk about Victor. And again, if you caught our other content, there is ultimately gonna be 2 very different play styles for Victor. You can have the all-in token strategy, which is what ended up winning the event that's pictured here. That's all about your big grand stratagem payoffs and making sure you're closing out the game with value over time. Or you can go into a much heavier mind or blue package and just play a bunch of spells to slowly grind out value from your opponent. But between the two, order or yellow is by far the most complete. It definitely feels like we're still missing a few mind cards. So no shocker at all here to see a 12 order rune style of deck because, well, we don't have any power cost for blue in our deck. Everything can be paid with order. In terms of our battlefields, we have War Camp, Obelisk of Power, and Reaver's Row. Not too much to say about battlefields, at least for the sake of this video. 2 reasons why. 1, we're still missing like 10 battlefields overall. And 2, I want to do a deeper dive on battlefields in general so I can talk about what is legend advantage battlefields and what is more legend neutral. So in this case, Reaver's Row is like just the staple legend neutral style of battlefield in the game currently, because it allows you to retreat your unit, keep it alive, and do a major crackback by sacrificing that point, right? Yes, your opponent is going to conquer it, but if you have a unit that you really want to keep handy, in the biggest case here, probably Victor being a key engine, it allows you to just retreat it, make sure it remains safe, and then use it on the following turn to go where you need. So for that reason, I think Reaver's Row is one of the better examples of legend neutral style battlefields. But again, I kind of want to do a bigger deep dive on this once we have all the battlefields overall and kind of include a ranking in terms of what are the key ones that go with each legend and then which ones are the most neutral or even disadvantage, right? In the case of like Voidgate, Victor doesn't have any way to really lean in other than the Falling Comet from a damage-based instance. A lot of it is going to be, of course, the Hidden Blade or the Culling Strike, which just kills stuff outright. So you don't get a lot of value out of that extra damage increase. Now, you could lean Victor towards the blue side and go more Spell Slinger and then get value out of Void Gate. But again, that's not the purpose of today's video. Going to dive into that more a little bit later. But again, back to the case at hand. We do have the order style of Victor. Now, again, early game is still important. We have to keep in mind that playing things like Ravenbloom Student when we have a overall spell package is nice for just getting a little bit of extra might. And then the Soaring Scout allows us to just ramp up some extra runes. We are playing a bit of an expensive brew here with the top end being Grand Stratagem and even the Harness Dragon just being key removal. But we, again, are trying to focus on those early battlefield conquers and making sure that our opponent just doesn't get to run away for free with it. Of course, the obvious strategy to acknowledge here is also the Call of the Week. We do not care at all if we're removing a Soaring Scout if it helps us ramp and we know that's in a losing position anyways. Or, of course, we can just rely on Victor's Legend ability to produce some extra recruits and make sure we have tokens to sacrifice for the Call of the Week effect. So, again, in terms of Legends, I get the most value or flexibility out of Call of the Week, which is one of the stronger spells in my opinion out of the first set. Sacrificing a recruit that you can just pay 1 extra for at any time is always going to feel great. And then, of course, there's also the option to run some more of the Death Knell style of cards that are available in Mind in Order to get even more value out of it, but again, going into a little bit different of a build. Now, overall for token generation, we have the Drummer, the Manufacturer, and the Vanguard Captain being kind of the key strategies here. I do want to give a shout out for Cruel Patron as well, because we're able to get the tokens consistently with Victor's Legend ability. A 6 might unit is just very welcomed. And then, of course, the other side of this that I got to give a shout out to is Consult the Past, which wasn't, it's a newer spoiler, so it wasn't in the list originally, while this is a very, staple deck that we've seen time and time for Victor, due to the fact that it's been as part of the trial decks. Consult the Past is just really nice for helping us dig a little bit deeper into finding those answers, as well as playing a hidden card at the battlefield. Because we're playing Hidden Blade, can keep your opponent second guessing if they can really afford to go into that. A previous problem that we had with Victor is that the only hidden deck that it played was Hidden Blade. So you're always, oh, well, obviously, I know what that card is at the battlefield, but now in this case, with Consult the Past, we have now the flexibility of offering up a second option that says, hey, now you have to guess if I'm drawing 2 cards or you're drawing 2 cards because I'm going to kill whatever you move to the battlefield, right? So I do appreciate the fact that we got another hidden card that we can ultimately use and overall helping round out the Victor deck. Again, at the time of recording, in terms of overall legends that are most likely the most complete, it is absolutely going to be Victor and Jinx, in my opinion. So I'm curious to see how the rest of the meta shapes up as we get more spoilers. Moving on from there, we have Ahri, which is all about controlling the battlefield, Mind and Calm coming together to make sure you're able to load up on your defenses and just get extra value out of either the blue Ahri, which allows you to have more might manipulation, or sometimes you just want to score some extra points. You have the Calm Ahri, which gets you an extra point for holding. And what's really nice about this, and you'll probably see a couple others that are doing this throughout the top 8 list, you can run a one of to put next to your legend at the start of the game, so you can rely on that Ahri whenever you want to play it once you've sculpted the perfect hand to do so. That makes it a really great addition. It's just a one of when you really need it. Now, otherwise, for those who are maybe unfamiliar with what Calm and Mind has been trying to do, we do have one of the best, in my opinion, removal options, it turns out, in the case of Charm, because so often you're able to set this up for either sacrificing one of your opponent's units because it gets charmed into a battlefield, which you just take it out, or it can help you conquer a point when you really need it, right? It's just so versatile at what it wants to be doing that it is definitely my favorite card overall in Calm. But for those who have maybe played Legends of Runeterra in the past, this is ultimately just the Ionia style of domain, because we have things like Defy or Deny, right, for just straight countering a spell. We have Discipline, which can give us +2 might in a draw, which is just really nice to see. And also, I really appreciated the all-in meditation here of just drawing extra cards, because we want to hold a battlefield early and we have the blue Ahri to just stick on there and be a very great defensive option. We should be able to get the most amount of usage out of meditation and drawing extra cards that can help sculpt our hands to make sure that we're holding that point turn after turn. Now, some of the other key champions here that I want to give a call out to is Sona. We've talked about this card a lot in the past. Any Calm deck will most likely get a lot of value out of this because you can just always leave up runes for your type of counterplay spells that you want to be using, which is really nice to see. And then also Kai'Sa, I think this is a great addition here because early on, you can just use it in combination with meditation to get the extra draw if you really want to. In the mid game, you can use Consult the Past and get extra draw that way. Or as I mentioned, sometimes you might be lower on your victory points. You just need a way to catch up. So Kai'Sa being able to go into a charm, and she has 6 might, so it's good enough, right? To immediately remove something is going to be another very strong play off of it. I think Kai'Sa is definitely one of the better mind units that we have access to currently, just how it lines up in the other legend units. Again, we are still missing quite a few key cards from Mind overall, but I do like this in just a wide variety of decks because of the versatility that it provides. So if you are someone who loves more control style of decks and you are excited to see what type of counter spells you can use in the game, then definitely look forward to this Ahri list. Moving on from there, we're going to have the discard Jinx aggro. This is all about low to the ground, getting those points early, and really leaning in on Jinx's legend ability to draw extra cards per turn. We have to give a shout out here to her signature spell up front, though. Super Mega Death Rocket, dealing 5 damage. The fact that you can loop it back, it just does so much for what you want to be doing. And the other part that I want to acknowledge from at least more aggressive strategies, that's been a newer card, both of them have being newer that we really are like to see in these aggressive strategies, is Draven and the Arena's Greatest with giving you an extra point. There have been a number of games where I just really needed to hold that last point and make sure that I can get up to 8. And Draven being effectively a 10 might card when you need it is absolutely insane. This guy, if you get the early lead and you get that might stacking up, it is going to be very hard for your opponent to interact with this in particular. Of course, the other kind of key card that we have for lining up either big swing turns or just capturing a battlefield out of nowhere is going to be Misfortune. Because it allows you to play directly to the battlefields, that's another great way to get that might turn after turn to really get extra value of the Draven and starting to build it up. Now, the one that's been not in as many lists as I've seen in the past, but one that I really do like is the Immoral Phoenix, right? We just talked about how good Super Mega Death Rocket is and the fact that we can easily loop it back. The Phoenix allows us to have recursion in a unit that goes up to 5 might, which is a very nice number itself. And when we combine that with Cleave, it gives us 8 might, which is going to hit the vast majority of stuff that your opponent is going to be trying to defend with, especially if they are a more go tall strategy that you can easily line up sequencing to get control off of a battlefield. Of course, it's just great to discard anyways for Jinx effect because it can come back, so it's always a free discard target. And then again, having 2 of these line up on a turn is going to be absolutely insane because both of them are going to come back off of your Super Mega Death Rocket, giving you a 10 might swing when you really need it. And then lastly, we gotta give a shout out to Vi here because it is the why are we doing a bunch of discarding outside of Jinx's ability, right? Vi allows you to use your trash as another resource and just go for one big powerful punch right at the end to clear the way. Really love Vi and a bunch of the discard-based strategies, and it really helps getting those right might numbers when you need them at most. Now, the other key shoutouts I got to give to here are Gust and Rebuke. These are just our other pieces of interaction that can disrupt our opponent's board, and especially if they are playing a slightly slower deck, these cards can be the missing piece of I just need to stabilize one more turn to set my opponent back, and Gust in particular has been crazy good at disrupting what your opponent wants to be doing, or if they try to attack into a base, right, you can just gust their higher might unit of what they're trying to swing in with, and then suddenly you're coming out with a might advantage. So Gust, when timed correctly, is a very, very strong card. And then, of course, Rebuke, while it does have 2 power cost, if you're going up against the late game style of decks, or maybe like Volibear, just rebuking anything back to their hand is effectively a time lock, meaning you set them back a full turn, so you're more than welcome to pay the power cost because you are likely going to win on the very next turn. Moving on from there, we have Lee Sin, which is more of a go tall strategy in Calm and Body. And this one is another one that I'm a very big fan of, and I know this is Max's pet deck, but I just really like Body in general because, well, especially now with Kiana, I think that's just a key card to be very excited about. It just does so much, everything that Body was kind of missing, but it's now also the mix of having the counterplay with Calm and getting spells, as well as the various fight effects that we see either through Snapvine or through Challenge. There's a lot of ways to interact with our opponent's board that's always going to keep them guessing. So Lee Sin being able to buff up our units, making sure that we're getting a little extra might when we need it, and then having these big flashy finishers with like the Lee Sin, as we mentioned, just stacking up buff counters, getting super big, and then protecting it through things like a Defy or just giving it extra might when you really need to, can make it very difficult for your opponent to come back. So this is a little bit slower of a deck just in terms of overall mid-rangey feel of getting the key removal you want while stacking one big guy. Lee Sin is definitely a deck to look out for, and one that definitely got a lot better with recent reveals. So I'm curious to see what other spice we might have as we look for the last couple cards in spoiler season. And then, of course, I got to give a huge shout out to Lux. This one goes right to my heart because I've been hyping this up a little bit and I was working on some other videos for it. But Lux is your control spell slinger style of deck. If you love drawing extra cards and just saying, hey, I want my removal to do everything and more, then Lux is the legend for you. I think there's going to be an interesting dynamic depending on what the last couple of mine cards are, if people are going to gravitate towards either Lux or Kaisa, but both do have a very similar, we want to be a spell slingers type of feel to them. But for me, I love drawing cards, so I got to give it up for this version of Lux in particular. Now, the one thing I got to acknowledge up front that I really wish I could have seen some of the games, and I got to give a shout out to Blanket for this one. We're running a full package of Promising Future. This card, of course, is going to trigger with Lux's ability, being able to draw a card, but I just love the high roll, let's see what we find style of decks, because we can also just go into a final spark and remove whatever our opponent is going to be playing, which then allows us to draw an extra card. So likely we just want to hit our removal effects off of this and then just draw 2 cards for free. So we get to play like the lower to the ground units and then back them up with all this key removal. But Promising Future is just such a fun card, and I'm not sure if it'll find a home in the more, full on competitive set. But for multiplayer battles and stuff like that, I think this is just absolutely great as an AI option. Now, the other card I do want to give a shout out here for as well is Shen. This is being a more strictly control focused style of card, allows us to play our cheaper units to the battlefields when we really need them. And then because we have things like Stupefy that our opponent has to be mindful of, we have a few different hidden cards that we've already talked about with in case of Victor that we may or may not want to play. Shen is another great option that allows you to hold a battlefield when your opponent might not be expecting it. And because we are playing a relatively low power deck, meaning we don't need seals or anything like that, we can ramp up our runes pretty nicely into getting a point where playing things like Shen into a Echo on our next turn and then using Echo's big cost is not that big of a loss for us. So this is one that I'm very excited for to see how it plays out overall. I think with the lower end, you got to figure out what units are going to be best. So maybe some of these do get changed around a little bit. But Lux, again, for me personally, being a control main, being someone who's very excited for just spell slinging value, this is definitely one it's in the proving grounds, which was funny, but one that I'm very excited about because I think Lux does have a home, at least so far, and I'll have to see how it matches up against Kaisa. Once we see what the other, the red Kaisa does, for example, could lean people more in that direction, but all the same, very excited for Lux. And then moving on from our last one, we have Darius, which I've also done a gameplay video on. And this is just good bodies go aggro, right? So it's slightly different from the Jinx deck in the fact that you want to do the Legion effect, which means you play 2 cards per turn. But you will notice that we still want to play things like the Vi. They don't have the Draven in this list, but I do like the idea of playing Draven as well because it just goes up so high in your might totals. But the real reason maybe why you want to look into Darius over Jinx comes down to the signature spell. While Jinx does give you the option to get more copies of it effectively because you can just loop it back multiple times, Noxian Guillotine is going to be better against the go tall style of decks because you can just straight remove something, and this gives you the option to have 6 hard removal cards in your your deck, meaning your early aggressive units are going to be backed quite well with whatever type of removal you want. So Darius's Legion ability giving us the extra energy that we need to curve out into some of these plays. I mean, you can just set up some very, very aggressive might leading boards as early as turn 4 that, unless your opponent is playing an equally low to the ground aggressive deck, a single Hidden Blade or a single Noxian Guillotine when timed correctly can just win you the game on the spot. So this is one that I think definitely needs more tinkering. I'm very curious to see what the final Darius list is going to look like, but the fact that you get 6 hard removal spells, I think just is so good for what this deck wants to be doing. And so with that, once again, thank you to Max and Riftbound decks for putting all this information together. Let me know your thoughts on the current state of the meta. Is there one legend in particular that you're most excited about that maybe didn't make the cut or just needs a couple more cards to really shine through? Definitely let me know. But for me personally, I got a lot of demos that I'm going to be doing for Riftbound here pretty soon, both at my local level and just some other people have asked for games over webcam and whatnot. So very busy month ahead, all things considered, but looking forward to getting more gameplay content out here pretty soon because, again, spoiler season's almost completed, so we should have all of set 1 available to us, and then the real trading arc can begin. So thank you so much all for supporting all the Riftbound content. Again, looking forward to seeing what other community type events pop up in the near future. But until next time, stay safe, stay hydrated, and see you in the next one. Cheers.